Hello, my name is Cassandra Blanco. I am Roman Catholic and I welcome you to my podcast. Today, my guest is my friend Theresa Callahan. Do you want to say hello?
Hello.
So I welcome her to my podcast, and I'm just going to read a short biography about her about her before we begin. So Theresa was born and raised in the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the USA. She now lives in the city with her husband Tom of almost 10 years, and their two boys, Tommy and Paul. Her work has spanned caring for the elderly, the sick, and young children as a nanny. She loves her Catholic faith and cares deeply about the dignity of human life at every stage. She enjoys all things hospitality and spending time with her guys. So, welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Good to be
Yes.
here.
Yes. So, on a personal note, Teresa and I know each other because I was a focus missionary in Philadelphia at Temple University from 2008 to 2010. And so, Teresa was in my Bible study and I was a mentor. And so, we became very, very good friends and have stayed in touch since. So, very happy to welcome you to my podcast, my friend.
Thank you.
Yes. So why don't we go ahead and jump into your story? So today's
Sure.
podcast is going to be about your marriage, but it's like honed in on losing a child or losing children. So why don't we just go ahead and start off where were you born? I mean, I've gone in briefly, but if you want to expand more, where were you born? Where were you raised? The start of your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. I was born and raised in Delaware County outside of Philadelphia and went Catholic school K through 12. Always had a love for my faith. My grandmom in particular really instilled like a love of the faith in me. And then, so I was very involved in grade school and high school. And then when I went to college at Temple, where I met you, we had focus missionaries and just a great chaplain at our Newman Center, and really dove in deeper to the personal relationship with Jesus and just really learning the Bible and evangelization, just being able to spread God's word. So, um, yeah, that experience was a real blessing to me. And then um, because of the good community that I had in college, I chose to seek out good community post college, which can be hard to find, like to find other Catholic young people in community that are,
Mm-hmm.
praying and living together and just going through life together. So um, I was involved in a community called the St. Paul's House, which was um, at a parish. There was a convent that wasn't being used anymore. And so um, there were some Catholic young adult men that rented out the convent, and then they had a young adult mass and dinner every Thursday night. So different priests would come visit and say mass for them in the chapel in the convent, and then we would go downstairs and have dinner, and everyone would take turns cooking, and it was just great fellowship for the 18, mostly like 22 to 35 um, age group of Catholics,
Mm-hmm.
and then I helped our college chaplain also start his young adult Catholic community in a different section of the city, um, the Catholic Center for Young Adults.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of great community and growing in the faith. And yeah.
Yeah. Can you maybe share just a little bit about what it was like going to Temple University? Temple was a very secular college, and some very interesting things happened at Temple and surrounding Temple. So, can you just talk about anything that you want to share about just keeping your faith in college, or did you feel like it was ever challenged, or the importance of finding that community while you were in college as well? I know you talked about like it was a good community, but just in the immersion of also going to Temple University and being in that city and that campus.
Yeah, I think, college in general, like if you live away from home for the first time, then, you're experiencing a lot of different things. And there's, you have yourself as your accountability, but not your parents, right? And then you go to a college that's more secular and
Mm-hmm.
is not like your home.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people and professors, have a more secular worldview.
Mm-hmm.
So I, I mean, by the grace of God, I've always kind of erred on the side of stick with the faith, you know. I
Mm,
just have been grateful to be blessed with um, a childlike faith, I guess, in a
mm-hmm,
way. I would have like, I would have doubts here and there, or I would be in situations where I would like start straying a little, but I never felt the need to like, cast it all aside and try
mm-hmm,
something different. I always kind of like landed back at home base, which was
mm-hmm,
my faith. But being in that environment definitely required um, community. And so, really leaning on my friendships at the Newman Center, with the other students there, relying on the missionaries and our chaplain and the assistant director and everyone, it really helped me not only like maintain my faith, but grow in my faith. And I
mm-hmm,
think when you're experiencing so much change and independence so quickly in college, like it was good for me to have a place to like experience new things,
mm-hmm,
but in what I would consider a good way, you know?
mm-hmm.
Um, so I could have experimented in a lot of ways and I went to a Bible study. You know what I mean? So like I
Yes.
grew, I was able to grow in my faith
Yes.
versus like, you know, maybe
Right.
any
The
other things.
community at Temple University, the Newman Center, and then the Focus Missionaries were very important for community in that place.
Yeah,
Yeah. And Father
definitely. And
Mahoney, amazing priest.
I
So,
mean, yeah, future saint.
yes.
But yeah, he was incredible and just
Mhm,
so relational. And
mhm,
as people, like as humans, we are relational. Like we're meant for
mhm,
community. And you don't want to base like decisions and things that you make off of like emotion
mhm,
necessarily. Like there's nothing wrong with feelings, but we don't want them to dictate every decision in our lives.
mhm,
But we are relational. And so to be able to grow intellectually in things, I think it's much more successful if you also have like really good relationships
mhm,
around you
mhm.
during that time, and
Right.
relationships that are supporting that.
Mhm,
So you're able to, I think when you have really good holy friendships, it just gives you that little taste of heaven, or
mhm,
that taste of that love of God and others that you
mhm,
need.
mhm.
So,
So would you say, Teresa, that when you grew up Catholic, but would you say that when you got to the Newman Center, your faith deepened? Like it became
oh yeah.
more, yeah, like it became more intentional and more lived out and all of that. It changed in that sense. It wasn't just something culturally you did on Sundays with your family and that was it, but it became much more
No.
personal. Do you want
Yeah,
to
it
share
was
anything about
definitely
that?
more personal. I would say it's not that nothing in my faith was personal growing up, um, but there was definitely a depth there that there wasn't. I had like adoration across the street where like I had because I wasn't in like like an 8 to 3 school day, I had like gaps in my schedule where I was able to go and pray in front of the Blessed Sacrament, which was a big gift, and
Mm-hmm.
just be able to go to Bible studies and learn more, read books that I could, understand better because I was older, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So there was definitely a deepening of faith and also having the example of like other people near my age, but, a little older, a little wiser that had like a deepened faith and they were very joyful and it was
Mm-hmm.
attractive. Like when you see that joy, you want it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, awesome. All right, so why don't we go ahead and get into the story about your how you met your husband, who I know, Tom.
yes,
So, do you want to just share about that journey? Your meeting, dating, getting married, all of that.
sure. Um, so Tom and I met at Temple. We were both involved at the Newman Center. He was 2 years ahead of me. And we didn't know each other very well in college because he was like studying for actuarial exams, which are just these very difficult exams that you need to pass in his profession. He's an actuary. So um, he was not available for a lot of social things because he was bogged down by these exams. And he was a little more introverted in general. So between being introverted and studying, he just wasn't at as many things as me. So we crossed paths and we knew of each other, but we didn't really spend any time together in college. And then when he left college, he, like me, wanted to find community. So he started going to the St. Paul's house, and I had started going already with you
Hmm.
on Thursday nights, even though I was still a student. And Tom started getting rides there with us because he didn't have a car. So we would get rides
Wait,
to
I
St.
don't
Paul's
remember
house.
this at all.
You don't remember this? This was like
No.
early days, early
Oh my
days.
gosh, that's so funny. I remember St. Paul's House because I got involved, I think, in my first year or my second year. And then I started bringing friends. Like, I
Hmm.
brought some missionary, some of my missionary friends, but then I also started bringing students who seemed like they were interested in something outside of just Temple Newman Center. That's where I think I brought Becca there, maybe. I don't know. Anyways, I know I brought you. So but I don't remember the details about Tom. I remember him being very quiet and like he
Hmm.
was a disciple of Tim's. I do remember that.
Right.
But that
Yeah.
was
And he,
about it.
after college, he lived with the guy Focus Missionaries.
Mm,
And so I think, they lived like very close to where he worked downtown. And
hmm.
so he didn't need a car. He
Hmm.
just would walk to and from work or take the
Hmm.
bus if it was like pouring rain.
Hmm.
So he didn't have a car. So he would go to work and then he would take the subway up to Temple
Hmm.
and ride like with us. Or if you weren't with me, like he would just come with me.
Hmm.
Um, and so he got really involved at the St. Paul's house and then he ended up moving in and he lived there for 4 years. And so we got to know each other there. So we became friends like at Thursday night dinner, and then we led a couple like book studies. Like we read a few books with some of the people from St. Paul's house. So we
Hmm.
were together another night of the week for that. We helped Father Mahoney with his new Catholic center. That was like a night or two a week. And so we were just always together. And then all of a sudden it was just like, oh, yeah, maybe something there. And then Tom asked me out in 2013. And then we dated for a year and a half and then got engaged in 2014 and then got married in June of 2015.
Hmm.
So it'll be 10 years this year, which is
Aw.
wild.
Hmm.
So yeah, so it's been a wild ride. It's
Hmm.
funny when you're praying for your vocation for a long time, and then it turns out it's the guy like two pews over. You just like
He's just right with you. Yeah, and a
it's just a
friend.
funny surprise.
Yeah, it's a good friend too, like somebody that you know deeply and trust deeply too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's nice. I mean, I know not everyone meets that way, and that's fine, but it's nice in the sense that you don't start dating and you try to be what you think they want you to be.
Hmm.
It's just like, well, you already know, so
Right.
we're in it now.
No surprises. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
And
knew
just
and you
so
asked anyway, so.
right. For some context too, St. Paul's house was a house like Teresa said with there was a convent, it was an old convent, and every Thursday night, I think it was, they would
Hmm.
have was it mass? I can't
Mass and
remember.
dinner.
Yeah,
Yep.
mass and dinner. So a bunch of young adults and college and young adults would gather together in the chapel, go to mass together, and then we would have dinner afterwards. So it was a great community in
Yeah, it
Philadelphia.
was great. And the
Hmm.
guys that lived there would also pray like night prayer together
Hmm.
3 or 4 nights a week too.
Hmm.
So it was great for the guys to have that, um, basis of prayer,
Hmm. Right.
and then able to like be hospitable and give in that way.
Hmm.
And it was just a great group. It was a
Hmm.
great group. It was a huge blessing to our lives and to a lot of people and some religious discernment and a lot of marriages and families came out of it and
Hmm.
just really good friendships. And like we still get together. Like I'm working on a Lenten retreat for the girls right now, that we'll be going away to in March. And then the guys have a men's retreat every fall. So
Hmm.
it's a really good community.
That's awesome. All right.
Hmm.
So you guys got married, and then why don't you go ahead and share about your journey of, getting pregnant and that infertility and that whole journey? Just the whole story about that.
Okay. Buckle up.
Yes.
So yeah, when we were going into marriage, we were ready to start a family. We didn't have any reason to not be starting a family,
Hmm.
and we were pretty eager to start a family. So we were learning natural family planning, which is like, tracking your cycle, know when you're going to get pregnant. Um,
Yeah. So just
and
to, just to pause really quickly, maybe we can elaborate on what natural family planning is. Do you want to just
Sure.
share a little bit more about what that actually is?
Yeah, sure. So you track, there are certain times in a woman's cycle when she can get pregnant and certain times when she can't. And so there are multiple methods for tracking it. And I don't know how much detail you want
Yeah,
or
so
don't.
it's just not using contraception, but rather using a way to track the woman's cycle to then abstain if somebody is trying to delay pregnancy or avoid pregnancy, and then to then go ahead and engage in sexual activity if you're trying to
Right.
get pregnant. So it's the way that the Catholic Church teaches how to have marital relations without using contraception. So if you want to add
Right.
anything
Yeah.
else to that.
Because we always, yeah, um, you always want um, intercourse to be like open to life.
Hmm.
And so it's supposed to be unitive and procreative, but the church doesn't need everyone to have 15 children
Hmm.
either. You know, there's an understanding that there are situations where, like, either for health, or like serious
Finances.
financial, or
Hmm.
what, there are certain circumstances where, the church understands, like, you may not be able to have a baby right this second,
Hmm.
and so that's why it gives us these tools. And it also helps those of us that are trying to get pregnant and
Hmm.
not getting pregnant know, like, when are you most likely to get pregnant.
Hmm.
And it also just helps women understand, like, their bodies and any hormonal issues or health issues that they might have. It's very useful.
Yeah, and I
Um,
will just add one more piece to that, that it also adds the discipline of chastity. Because unlike in a contraceptive society when sex is always available with anybody you want without any consequences, natural family planning allows for there to be the chastity of two people who are in self control of their desires and their passions and using them with responsibility for when they every single time that they enter a sexual act with their spouse.
yeah, and it also, it's easy to say, like, well, if you use NFP, what's the difference between,
Hmm.
contraception and NFP? You're not you're not like putting a barrier. So,
Hmm.
like, at the end of the day, like, we look at our charts or our information and we say, okay, we shouldn't get pregnant right now, but at the end of the day, if God wants you to have a baby, you have a baby. And
Hmm.
so if you get pregnant, you say, okay, well, I was open to this.
Hmm.
Like,
Right.
you know, not that lightly. Having a baby is a big deal, obviously. So
Right.
there's a range of emotions, even when you're
Yes.
trying. You're like, I'm having a baby. But it's just keeping that openness
Hmm.
to life, which is
Hmm.
the difference. So yeah.
All right.
So
Mhm.
anyway, so when we were engaged, I started taking classes to learn how to track my cycles. And then, when we were married, we did that for 1 or 2 months just to make sure I knew how to use it.
Hmm.
Because I had several friends that didn't use it right away. And then it's kind of trickier to figure out, like, afterwards, like, especially if you're nursing a new baby and things like that. So they were like, just know what you're doing for like a month or two because you're gonna wish you knew after you have your first baby.
Mm.
So we did that, and then we were like, let's have a baby. We were very excited, and 1 month, 2 month, like, no baby. We're like, okay, like, this happens, I guess. And so I went to my instructor, and she had recommended seeing a doctor because she had seen some things in my chart that indicated, like, probably my hormones were off. Um, so I went to the doctor and we did all the blood work and going over the charts, and determined I had low progesterone, which you need progesterone to get, like, once you've conceived, you need the progesterone to be high enough that the egg will implant
Hmm.
and be healthy.
Hmm.
Um, and if it's not, then you're just gonna start a new cycle. So
Hmm.
progesterone is very important. So I started supplementing with that, and then also took some medication to help with ovulating because I wasn't ovulating very well. And in February of 2016, we found out we were pregnant. And then I got an ultrasound, like, at around 10 weeks, and I was pregnant with twins, which was crazy. And I, like, just in the room, I was like, "What do you mean there's two of them?" Couldn't wrap my head around it. So
Hmm.
that was wild. And so we got real excited. We were like, "Well, it took a little bit, but two for one. That's great. Um,
Right.
so yeah, so um, we were pregnant with the twins. We were thrilled, and then at the 20-week ultrasound, after we had some drama with finding a good OB. I was trying to get in at one hospital and I was getting the runaround. Their practice was kind of in a transition and messy. And so I ended up going to a different hospital. And then at the 20-week ultrasound, found out that one of the twins was gone, which is called a vanishing twin. And that's where the twin dies and gets reabsorbed into the body. So I never had any bleeding, never miscarried the baby, so I didn't know. So that was very jarring. And then the other baby that was still alive had almost no amniotic fluid. And that indicates that the baby's not able to eat because the fluid is like the pee, and so if they're not outputting anything, then they're not inputting anything
Hmm.
probably. And the baby was also very small. So we got a bunch of genetic tests done. They took a sample of the placenta to test that while I was still pregnant. And so it was kind of a wait and see. And then we would go back once a week for an ultrasound for a heartbeat check. And, they did a million tests. And at 26 weeks, the baby didn't have a heartbeat. So I was induced and was able to deliver him and hold him and be with him. And, Tom got to hold him and get pictures and everything. And our priest friend got to visit and just like be with us for a little bit, which was
Hmm.
very good. So yeah, so we had our boys in 2016, Francis and James, and then yeah, we had a memorial mass for them, and we're able to bury Francis with my great grandmom, and now my grandfather is with him. So that's comforting. And yeah, and then I got a blood clot after I delivered Francis because why not? It was already a bad week, why not throw in a
Mm.
blood clot? So then I was not able to, I had to be on a blood thinner, had to use NFP, natural family planning,
Hmm.
because I was unable to get pregnant on the blood thinner. It was not safe.
Hmm.
So I was on the blood thinner for 6 months. And then once we got off the blood thinner, even though it was very scary and intimidating to think of going through that again, we were like, okay, we just gotta try again.
Hmm.
So we tried and tried and tried, and nothing was happening. And we did all the blood work with the doctor, took all the supplements. Um, I went to a surgeon who said that I probably have endometriosis. And
Hmm.
so in 2018, I had surgery to remove endometriosis. And then also like got my tubes flushed, make sure nothing was in the way.
Hmm.
And then over time did two other procedures with him, just like less dramatic procedures. So, yeah, we did all the things and no baby. And then in, I think February, it was, yeah, around end of February of 2020, I went to him again and I was like, we're still not pregnant. What is going on? And he was like, honestly, you're probably just like so stressed out. Could you guys like take a vacation? Could you try to relax and go somewhere? Just try to take your mind off it. Don't be trying so hard because stress, affects the body a lot.
Hmm.
And we had done everything else. We had changed the food, we had done the procedures and the supplements. And I was like, okay, yeah, we'll try to, reduce some stress.
Hmm.
And then a global pandemic hit and the stress didn't go anywhere. So,
Just
so
escalated.
yeah, so that
Can
worked
we
out
stop?
great.
Wait, before you continue, Teresa, I want to just actually go back to, I know there's more to the story. So, but let's just go back a little bit. After
Okay.
you lost the twins,
hmm
what helped you get over that? How was it? Like, I mean, obviously it would be very painful, but what helped you heal, or how did you process it? What was I'm just thinking about women who could be going through this or have gone through this
Mm,
and need to know, how do I handle this? There's nobody telling me what to do and I've never been through this. So,
yeah. Well, one of the first things I did was I joined like a Facebook group for women that had lost children.
mhm,
And you kind of join this club that no one wants to be in. And
mhm,
it's a very sad club and a very painful club, but sometimes like when you're in hard times, you just need someone with understanding, even
mhm,
if it's not exactly the same.
mhm,
You need someone that has experienced something similar. So I joined that, and then I had also reached out through like friend of a friend of a friend to someone who had locally who had lost someone and went and like talked to her.
mhm,
Um, and so just talking to someone that had that experience was helpful. Um, and then um, in terms of like right when it was happening,
mhm,
uh, I mean, we had a good foundation of faith,
mhm,
which I think made all the difference. And I just kept telling myself, like, this is part of God's plan,
mhm,
and my children are safe. Like, they're in heaven. They
mhm,
never sinned, they never did anything wrong. Um, they're fine, you know?
mhm,
And it's just us that have to mourn them. And so that knowing that they were okay brought me a lot of comfort,
mhm,
knowing that they had never done anything wrong and they were with the Lord and with Mary, just being mothered by her there
mhm,
was very comforting. And then also just knowing when you're in very dark or trying times, there's so many emotions and like there's nothing wrong with emotions. It's like the weather inside us, like we can't control it,
mhm,
like our feelings, but we can control what we do with them.
mhm,
And I knew that if I gave in to my feelings, I would just lay in bed until I died because
mhm,
I was so sad. And so I just kept reminding myself of what I knew to be true,
mhm,
which is that I am loved by God. God has blessed our marriage. My children are with God. And I ultimately want his will for my life.
mhm,
And he's not punishing me, he's not trying to hurt me. And so I just, as I went through the stages of grief, I just kept reminding myself of that. There
mhm,
were times of anger, there were times of depression, there were times of like blaming myself, like
mhm,
maybe I ate something weird that like
mhm,
hurt them, or maybe I should have done this. Maybe I walked too much. Maybe I didn't walk enough. Maybe, maybe I
mhm,
had too much coffee. Maybe I didn't have enough water. Like you go through all these scenarios wishing you could control what happened.
mhm,
Um, and ultimately you can't um, after the fact. So, yeah, just leaning on what I already believed to be true when I was, you know, in a better place, a happier place.
mhm,
Um, you know, they Saint Ignatius says to not make big decisions in times of like extreme consolation or desolation.
mhm,
And it was the most desolation I'd had ever. And
mhm,
so I knew like this was not the time to like fly off the handle and just shut God out. I
mhm.
figured better to like yell at him or be upset with him. Like at least the
Right.
dialogue's still there,
Yeah.
better than ignoring him altogether. He can take it. So,
Yeah.
so there was lots of like, why God? Why, like,
Mhm.
why me? Why Tom? Like I just love my husband so much. I was like, how could you do this to Tom? Like,
Mm,
Tom would be the best dad ever. Um,
mm,
and yeah, so you just go through all that and just allow yourself to feel those things, but then try not to, you know, let it dictate your life.
right.
So it was
Absolutely.
very hard, but I was grateful that I had a good base, and then I just kept saying like, say it, just keep saying it until you believe it again, Just like keep saying it
Mm,
out loud. Like the Lord loves me. He wants what's best for me. My children are with him and they're okay, and he's
mm,
not punishing me.
right. Beautiful.
So
All
yeah.
right. So back to 2020, COVID went ahead and picked and started. So what happened
hmm
after that?
Well, luckily, right before COVID started, I started seeing a therapist. I found a Catholic therapist
Mm-hmm.
in the area through the Sisters of Life.
Mm-hmm.
And I started seeing her right before the pandemic, which was lucky because then anyone she's ever talked to was like, "Do you have any appointments?" Because everyone was so stressed.
Mm-hmm.
So I was seeing her, and that was helpful just working through some of the grief. And yeah, and then we were just kind of doing our best in the pandemic. We kept trying and doing all the things, and then we got to the point where we were like, well, it's been a long time. Um, and I had always been praying, like, if you want us to look into adoption, like, make it clear.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't feel like super peaceful about it, but Tom was saying, like, maybe it's time, let's just ask. So we talked to friends that had adopted
Mm-hmm.
and reached out to an agency that they used that we knew was good,
Mm-hmm.
like good to the birth moms and good to the kids and good to the families. And we called them and asked all the questions, and we had a great dialogue with her. And at the end of the conversation, she was like, "Yeah, you guys seem great, but our wait list is full. There aren't a lot of babies to
Mm.
adopt right now." So,
Wow.
yeah, and I guess, the pandemic, people were not making as many babies, and
Oh yeah. Was it local adoption or was
it
it
was in Florida.
no, but was it local like you were going to be adopting children from the States or abroad? Were you looking for children
Oh,
that were
domestic.
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so the agency was in Florida, um, but there just weren't a lot of babies at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then also during COVID, there were, uh, what are they called? Not stipends, but there was
Mm-hmm.
like funding where you would get like checks from the government per
Mm-hmm.
child. And so I think people that were having babies were more inclined to keep them
Mm-hmm.
because they would get like, support checks from the government
Mm-hmm.
during the pandemic because a lot of people lost jobs and all. So yeah, there just weren't. They had a full wait list. They weren't taking anybody else, and things like home studies expire after a year. So there was no sense in doing anything immediately if you didn't know if the list would open up again for a
Mm-hmm.
while. So we were kind of like, okay, um, well, we tried, like
Mm-hmm.
we reached out and the door was closed. So
Mm-hmm.
so then we went to a friend's wedding in Denver and ran into an old Focus friend whose support team we were on, but we were talking, in person about the whole thing, and she'd been praying for us for years. And then when we got home from the trip, she called me and she said, we've been praying a long time for you to get pregnant. Um, there's this girl who worked for Focus who died, and they want to make a documentary about her. They think maybe she's a saint. They want to explore that. They want me to be involved. I'm not really sure if it's just like, oh, we're focused. We're so cool. We made a saint, or like if she's legitimate. So she was like, let's say Novena to her and just see what happens. And I was like, sure. We've said one to probably everyone else up there. What's one more? Um, and so Novena is where you pray for 9 days in a row, asking for a specific intention. And a lot of times you would say it leading up to a saint's feast day or up to a special feast day. But
Mm-hmm.
we just made one up over the phone to this girl to get pregnant. And we got pregnant during the novena, which was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where I took the test and it was positive, and I showed it to Tom and he was like, "Why are you handing me this?" And I was like, "Because it's positive." Like he was like,
Oh.
"I don't understand why you're showing me another negative test."
Oh.
And then I was like, "Well, I probably did it wrong. I'll do another one tomorrow." Like I couldn't even fully
Yeah, believe it.
register.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was wild. So we found out in August of 2021 that we were pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was not without its dramas. It was like a small baby, probably not a great placenta again, but and he was born 6 weeks early, but we had Tommy in March of 2022,
Mm-hmm.
and he was in the NICU for a month, but he's great.
Mm-hmm.
I would say maybe too strong, too much energy at this point. But he's just great. He's almost 3. and just like sunshine. He's
Mm-hmm.
just so joyful and
Mm-hmm.
just makes everyone happy around him.
Beautiful.
And then like any good gift from God, you get it and you've waited so long for it and then you're like, okay, I want another one. And so so we prayed again to Michelle to get pregnant and nothing happened. And then a little while later, we found out we were pregnant again and we were
Mm-hmm.
so excited and then we were visiting friends out of town and it was early, but we told them because we knew we wouldn't see them in person for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were like, well, we're pregnant. Don't tell anybody. And they were like, we just said that novena you made up for you to have another baby. And so we
Oh.
were just so excited.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so then it was a similar thing. We found out similar time. And then Paul was also early and
Mm-hmm.
also in the NICU. It was like deja vu. It was like same place. Baby had the same face. They were the same size, but
Mm-hmm.
they're both great now. And Paul's like a baby Santa Claus. He's so jolly and always smiling and laughing. And they've just been such a blessing to us. So,
Mm,
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
So, can you share maybe just, I know you've talked about emotionally and just faith and stuff, but just the faith journey, has it helped you grow? Has it helped you cling to the Lord more? You know, the journey of infertility, the journey of losing a child. How has it
hmm
also impacted your marriage? Like,
hmm
how has that developed? Because stressors on marriages can have effects. Has it bonded you? Has it stressed it? Do you want to share
hmm
anything about those things?
Yeah. Well, Tom and I were very blessed to go through a really solid marriage prep program. And so I think we had a good, strong foundation going into marriage. And we had a lot of good tools to help us
Mm-hmm.
navigate these really hard things. That being said, relationship is always moving. It's like the tide. It's
Mm-hmm.
always, you're never still. And so you're either growing closer or you're growing apart. And so for us, we were intentional about making sure we were always leaning on each other, always growing closer, and really focusing on the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in a season of waiting, it's easy to be like, well, you know, we'll do those things like when we have a kid, or like our life will really be starting when we have
Mm-hmm.
a baby or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And that's not what the Lord wants. The Lord doesn't want us waiting around to like live our full lives once we get what we think we need to have next,
Mm-hmm.
we need to live in the present moment and ask ourselves, like, what is God asking of us right now? And in our case with infertility, all men and women are called to motherhood and fatherhood,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're married or single or in religious life.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, we were not physical parents of children on earth yet. And so we focused on, how can we be spiritual mothers and fathers? And so that was really like pouring into our children or our godchildren, our nieces and nephews, friends' kids. And it also gave us opportunities to like really love on others that needed it. So
Mm-hmm.
we served at a soup kitchen every week together and really like worked on those relationships with the guys that lived there. Um, and then I was able to care for Tom's grandmother while she was dying and basically be her home health nurse for that because she really didn't want to go to the hospital or to a home. And I was able to just, because I didn't have any kids at home,
Mm-hmm.
I was able to just be there with
Mm-hmm.
her for 2 weeks. And so that was such a gift and like a privilege to get to help get her ready to meet Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
and care for her and give her that opportunity to stay home. So yeah, we were just trying to find ways to love on other people and nurture other people when we didn't have our own kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't go away when you have children either.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you close out the rest of the world once you have
Right.
children. But
You
we
can still
had,
love other people even with young
yeah, but
children.
we had more time
Mm-hmm.
to like really give a lot. And then
Mm-hmm.
also, we're able to focus on each other. We took vacations and we started mentoring engaged couples and if you want to be good at something, keep teaching it because then you keep saying all those things out loud all the time and you're like, yeah, I should do that. Um,
Right.
it's good reminders to be like, oh yeah, I need to affirm Tom today or, um, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so, so yeah, it was definitely something that strengthened our marriage because we made sure it did,
Mm-hmm.
but if you're not paying attention, you can just wake up one day and be like so far away. So
Right.
it was something we were really careful about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
oh, and then I was just going to say my faith in general, infertility is a good control issue curer. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you want something and you can't get it and you get no say in the matter.
Mm-hmm.
And we could definitely say with confidence we did our part, like we did everything that we could, and if it didn't happen, it was not for lack of trying.
Mm-hmm.
We did everything the doctor said. We took care of ourselves, everything. So, um, yeah, so that it was good to surrender, um, control, and just really have to trust that God was going to fulfill the desires of our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a while, there was frustration and sadness over losing the twins and just, you know, kind of a lament. And then it kind of turned to like, okay, well, I want your will for my life, but also if these are the desires of my heart. So if this is not my will or your will for my life, then please take the desire away, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And the desire never went away. And now they're here.
Yeah.
And hopefully there will be more, because whenever you get something great, you're like, well, give me another one. So we would love some more too. But
You hear that, Lord?
yeah. So, oh, he knows. We talk. The request is clear. But yeah, so I mean, it's it's hard to say like I want your will even if it's not this thing that I want so badly.
Right.
But just to trust and understand like his plan is better than mine,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I used to, when I would hear other people talk about infertility, it would be very hopeful and it would be good, but there would also be this sense of like, well, okay, great, but like you have kids now. Like there's no
Mm-hmm.
light at the end of the tunnel. There's no like, okay, well, at this year or this month, then we know we'll get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so open-ended and you have no idea
Mm-hmm.
when things are going to work, and you get 12 tries a year if
Mm-hmm.
you're healthy, to get pregnant, and that's not very much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so much has to go right to have a baby. So, it's hard when you're in the thick of it and you don't know where the finish line is, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Right. Or
Um,
if you even have children, period,
right,
either way.
right.
It's
Like
like, well,
there was
we
also the reality of like, well, we may
never have
never
them.
have children,
Mm-hmm.
and there had to be, kind of an acceptance of that,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
But
Can you share, Teresa, as well, why you guys chose not to do IVF? I know a lot of people who are not Catholic or who are even Catholic but who do not understand or believe what the church teaches about contraception and IVF will choose that route if they're having infertility issues. So, can you share why that was a path you guys chose not to take?
sure. Um, Yeah, I would just say first, I understand the desire to have a baby, and I understand the appeal on the outside of
Mm-hmm.
IVF and having all the assistance. Um, but the church teaches that sex be both procreative and unitive, and in order for IVF to work, so much happens away from the couple,
Mm-hmm.
and so it is not unitive. And that's a big piece. Um, we don't want to do things, we don't want to distort what the sexual embrace is meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so for us, like IVF was taking God out of the equation, you know. Um, and also, the more I've learned, it just seems that there's a lot of issues in like the IVF world.
Mm-hmm.
There's like some like corruption, people would say, within the business itself.
Mm-hmm.
There's just they take advantage, I think, in some ways of people's like desperation to have children and like the crippling expense. And then also like all the embryos that are just left to die,
Mm-hmm.
or just left in a freezer. And then the pressure of like, well, do we keep them or do we give them up for adoption or do you just let them die or what do you do? You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's a messy industry. And so not wanting to be a part of that, and contribute financially to a place like that,
Mm-hmm.
um, was definitely on my mind, but also just knowing what God made sex and marriage for
Mm-hmm.
and not wanting to, you know, go outside of the Lord's plan to get my way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so,
Yeah. Yeah, as the church has teachings about contraception, about IVF, and about the way that God intended for sex to happen and for procreation to happen, for a child to be conceived. So you all desire to stay within those boundaries of what the church lays out.
hmm
Yeah.
yeah. And it's easy to say, like, you know, what could be wrong with the baby? You know,
Yeah.
and like
The good
obviously
part about it.
children that are,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, children that are born from IVF are like blessed and loved by God
Mm-hmm.
and have human dignity and all of those things. It's not a question of that, but it's just what are my intentions going in as the parent of these children?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I want to do the right thing and I want to do what God wants. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's nothing to do with like the children themselves. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
well, what like I have to stand before God when I die
Mm-hmm.
and say like I made these choices even if you didn't want me to, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it was hard because it's tempting to be like, well, if it's going to work, let's do it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um
Right. Especially
yeah,
in such a desire. The desire for having a child is so beautiful, but can also be so strong. So it's
yeah,
like, how can I make this happen? It's
right.
understandable why anybody would choose that, especially if they're
And
completely unfamiliar with this. Hmm.
yeah, we even had people that were like practicing Catholics that were like, well, why don't you just do IVF? And we're like, well, it's
Hmm.
against church teaching. And they'd be like, well, yeah, but you know, so and so's daughter did it. It's like,
Mm.
that's not the point, you know,
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
and you hope like they just don't understand. And,
Hmm.
you know, it's not for us to like decide what was right or wrong or what
Hmm.
people knew or didn't know. But what I know is I'm not going to do it, you know,
Hmm. Right.
as much as I would be tempted.
Yes, absolutely. Awesome. Do you want to share anything else? Do you want to share anything about just marriage or relationship? Any tips for young people that are getting married or also infertility? Any tips that you would have about faith, about, infertility, about child loss? Anything that you want to end with?
I mean, I could talk about all of that for a long time.
Did I just ask a ton of questions? Yes, share.
Um,
I just want you to have the opportunity to share whatever else you think you would be beneficial for
yeah,
others in your
yeah.
situation.
Trying, what does the Holy Spirit want me to say right now? Um, well, I would say, yeah, for marriage, particularly for Catholics getting married,
Hmm.
like practicing Catholics, um, you can have a good relationship with God and a good prayer life, but you have never been married before and you don't know how to be married.
Hmm.
So you need to have a good engagement process, a good, you know, marriage prep program. You know, Tom and I both had good prayer lives and were very involved in our faith when we got married, but we hadn't been married. And so
Hmm.
going through a good program, it helped us learn how to communicate in a really loving way. It helped us understand like our expectations of marriage going in, like what we grew up with, what we
Hmm.
saw that we liked, what we didn't like. And we learned what the other specifically needed and wanted out of our marriage. And so that was really useful. So I'd say if you're engaged, you know, they make seminarians go to school for like 8 years before
Hmm.
they can be a priest. You can't learn how to be married like on a Saturday afternoon in a
Hmm.
gym with
Hmm.
100 other couples. You can't.
Hmm.
There's so much. And so I would encourage you to find a program that is really solid and more than one day and the best case scenario would be like a couple to couple mentorship. That's what we had. And we still talk to our mentor couple and they still support us. And we're teaching now and we still connect with our couples. And it's just been a huge gift to us. In terms of infertility, listen, like be careful who you listen to, I guess, and be careful whose advice you take. You want to find doctors that understand human dignity, who understand the church's teaching on marriage and family, and that just respect your thoughts and concerns with your own health. And don't be afraid to, think outside the box. Like I'm not someone that would have necessarily been like, I'm going to do Whole30 or I'm going to do, paleo or keto or whatever, and no one, it's not that paleo heals everyone or Whole30 heals everyone, but you can just try. It never hurts to try something for a month, if you think that that is involved. But yeah, but just be mindful of who you trust in terms of your health. And then also just keep asking God, to either grant your desire or take it away and tell him that you want what he wants. That's the biggest thing. And child loss, just I really leaned into Lent and sorrowful mysteries and Blessed Mother on the cross, like after I lost the twins, Advent was like torture. It was like, yay, a baby's coming. Great. But Lent, I was like, this is my time. This is watching your child who did nothing wrong suffer. And I just really connected to the Blessed Mother in a way, in a deeper way than I had before. And it was a painful way to do it, obviously, but if it's happening, she's someone to really lean on, She understands better than anybody. So that was really helpful as well. But yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, my friend, for
Yeah.
sharing your journey. Very grateful for just sharing there are many women who go through child loss, infertility. It's a deep pain for many women. And I know women who've lost children 30 years ago and still they can tear up at the loss of those children in
Oh, yeah.
miscarriage or stillbirth, or even when they were adults as well. So at any point, the pain of a mother losing her child can be very sorrowful.
Yeah. And it doesn't really go away. It just it's kind of like weight training, like it's not that it gets lighter, it's just like you get better at carrying it,
Right.
you know.
You
But
learn
then
how to
sometimes
manage
if you're
it.
tired, it gets heavy again,
Oh,
and then, it's just
it's always there.
it's always there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how old your child was when if you were 5 weeks pregnant or they were 70 and you were 90, like burying a child is not something you plan for. And it's hard. We had a priest friend tell us, like if you lose a spouse, you're a widow or a widower, or if you lose a parent, you're an orphan. But there's like no word really to sum up like when you lose a kid. And I always just thought that was because it was really, really hard. And it was hard to put a name to it.
Right. And give a word to it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that will wrap up our podcast for today. To my audience, thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment and I will do my best to respond. I hope you have a great morning, day, or night wherever you are in the world. And God bless you. Bye bye.
Bye.